What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to the workshop. I hope you're all keeping well. Now, I want to do a quick video on the miter saw, understanding miter saw angles, and also looking at a jig that will allow you to cut any angle you want on your miter saw. So, there's a problem that beginners run into. It's a problem that I have run into myself, and it's a mistake that I've made before. And a number of you guys have asked me questions about this, so I said I would do a video on it and help you guys out, especially if you're new to woodworking or if you're thinking about buying a miter saw. Let's get in for a closer look, and I'll show you what the issue is. Right guys, a close up on the miter saw. Now, something very important to understand about the markings on our miter saw and understanding the angles. So currently this miter saw is set to 0 degrees. That means this line here is 0 degrees, the line that the blade runs along. Our fence both sides is at 90 degrees. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means this. If I move this miter saw and set it to 30 degrees. If you're new to using a miter saw, you might think now that you're cutting at an angle of 30 degrees or you're going to be left with an angle of 30 degrees. That's not actually the case. What you've actually done is moved from 0, you have moved 30 degrees, which means the angle between your fence and the blade is now 60 degrees. You started out at 90, you've moved 30, you're now left with 60. So that's something very important to bear in mind when you're cutting. So, if I just run a cut on the miter saw now. Now, this angle that I have now cut is 60 degrees. It is not 30 degrees. And the opposite angle that I've just cut off here is also not 30 degrees. This is the exact same, it's just a mirror image. So if I put the two of those side by side, you can see it is the same angle. So that causes us a problem. Now, most people don't run into this because most of the projects you will be doing, you will be cutting at 0 degrees, which will give you that nice 90-degree angle, or you will be cutting at 45, which means the angle that you're left with is 45. So half of 90 is 45. You have 45 degrees on this side, you have 45 degrees on this side. It's all the angles in between is where you start to run into the problems. And I will show you how to get to those angles now shortly with a jig. So if you actually want to cut to 30 degrees, you would have to swing your miter saw to 60 degrees. And obviously these miter saws don't swing that far, but there is something we can do. So it's something just to bear in mind, guys. Likewise, if I was to set my miter saw to 20 degrees, which is right there now, I have moved my miter saw 20 degrees, but this angle here is actually 70 degrees. So that's how your angles on a miter saw works. Right guys, so there we go. It's just something to bear in mind if you're new to miter saws, new to woodworking, or you're thinking about buying yourself a miter saw. So again, just to recap, those angles are how far you've moved your blade off 0. So you have to subtract them from 90 degrees to know what angle you're going to be left with. Now, some miter saws will have both markings. So if you set your miter saw to 30 degrees, it will say 30 and 60. So you know the angle that you're going to be left with. Just something to bear in mind again. It has caught me out a few times. When I started out, I was thinking those angles meant they were the actual angles I was left with, but it's not the case. Now, you're asking me, well, John, how do I cut angles of 20 degrees or 30 degrees if I can't swing my miter saw that far? Some miter saws might only swing as far as 45. Well, let me show you. It's a nice simple jig, and yeah, it works quite well indeed. Let's have a look. Okay guys, so here's how we cut extreme angles or really acute angles on our miter saw. You build what's called a 90-degree jig. So this is very, very simple. Piece of plywood with a back fence. It's just glued and screwed, a few countersunk screws on the back. Just cut it at 45 just to remove that material because you don't need all that. The most important thing is that the fence and this edge here is at perfectly 90 degrees. So this is what we do to set this up. We put it against our fence, we drop our blade, and I push it up against the side of the blade. Now I don't want blade deflection, so I'm just going to rest it against the side of the blade so that the blade is running along that the whole way. Now I know that's set in the right position. I'm going to clamp that now to my fence, just to hold that in place. Like so. Now that's going to allow us to cut all our acute angles. So if I take this piece of plywood now and I'm going to use this as my fence. So this is at 0 degrees. Now what that means is if I swing my miter saw now this direction out to 30 degrees, But the angle that I set my miter saw to is actually 30 degrees. So we've moved 30 degrees off this fence. So we're referencing this fence. So the angle here is 30. The angle between this fence and our blade is still 60. But now we can take advantage of this 30-degree angle right here. So let's run this cut. Okay guys, there we go. A perfect angle of 30 degrees, really acute. Now something to bear in mind here, you might want to put a bigger fence, so you can make that fence slightly higher here if you're cutting thicker material, and you can clamp that material to your fence. Again, you don't want to get your hands near that blade, so always make sure that your hands are nicely away from the blade and the material is properly held. So, like I said, you can actually make a fence upright here and clamp pieces to it too. But if you're cutting pieces of plywood like that, a piece of inch or 3/4 ply will be good enough. So there's a 30-degree angle, and I can even get more acute. I can drop that to 20 degrees, or we can cut that as well. So that's how we cut our extreme angles on our miter saw. And if your miter saw only swings to 45, well, this is how you get all the rest of the angles as well. The 90-degree jig, it's nice and simple and very, very quick and easy to make. Okay guys, so there we go, how the angles on your miter saw works, a 90-degree jig, and how to cut all those extreme angles. So I hope that helps you guys out. If any of you guys are new to woodworking, you're thinking about buying your first miter saw, hope this video helps you out and saves you guys making the mistakes that I have made on my miter saw. So there we go, until the next video guys, take it easy, I shall see you then.